Hello and welcome back to another episode of FSMA Presents. In this episode, we are joined by FSMA Executive Director Jennifer Williams, and she's joining us to discuss some key takeaways and reflections from 2021. What a year 2021 has been, Jen.
I know, Michaela. If you remember back to when we were interviewing you and you were thinking about taking the job, would you ever have anticipated?
Oh my gosh!
When I was explaining what the FSM conference was, did you ever anticipate we would be in a situation like we were for planning FSM 6?
No, not at all. Because I remember it was maybe a few months in, and I went to my first conference in, was it?
Oh, Kampala, the Afro Congress.
Yes. And I was already thinking, okay, so this is what FSM 6 is going to be like. I'm really excited. And then COVID, pandemic, and then we were planning for a virtual scenario. And it was very different from what I expected. But hey, we pulled it off.
Same here. It was different from what I expected as well, to be honest. We know some of the planning. I had actually been, ironically, really looking forward to FSM 6, the planning process being different. We had more time. I spoke about that quite openly with the conference committee and the board to some degree. And then everything changed. And so what I was most excited about ended up being a big necessity, because we did need some time to really rethink how we were going to do this. And I think it had some interesting implications for the organization as well, because when we were trying to decide what the FSM Alliance should be like, which is always hard to do before it exists in real life too. Thinking about what it could be is different than what are we trying to do today. But I think when we were planning it, so much of everything that we planned for and thought about activities and how we were going to bring things together with other regional events, so much of that depended on bringing people together in person. And travel. And so I would really say, in a lot of ways, while we were really fortunate that the pandemic didn't impact our daily lives in the same ways it did for the essential workers, it totally changed what we thought it was going to be like for running the organization and really trying to create a member platform, a really successful member platform virtually. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges we faced in 2021 was how do we translate bringing this conference into the virtual space. And I think we still didn't quite hit the mark in terms of the networking opportunities that we provided in the virtual space. That just is simply because we ran out of time, and I'll be honest about that. There's more activities that we could have done. But I will also say we specifically chose to structure our platform so that it would have the lowest bandwidth requirements. So some of those really fancy features that you see in other conference platforms required more bandwidth, and we knew bandwidth was going to be an issue for some of our... It's been an issue for some of us, even just having team meetings here in the Netherlands. So we know that the internet is not as reliable as we'd like it to be, and that was a strong consideration of when we set up the platform itself too. But I would say that is sort of... I was just sort of thinking about our achievements for 2021 in preparation for this. And honestly, I really felt like writing survived the pandemic. Baseline. Like we survived. Yeah.
That's incredible. And I guess I also want to say that a huge shout out to everybody who was part of that process, who was part of those discussions week in and week out to try and figure this out. We couldn't have done it without you. So thank you to everybody who was part of the process, who helped us, who gave us constructive feedback, and was also just patient with us as we tried to figure ourselves out. But yeah, now that we're winding down for 2021, do you have any reflections? What are your reflections for the past year?
I think so. We've kind of touched on the challenges. I'm sure they're same for some others as well. COVID presented a pretty big challenge for all of us, and I think even more so in 2021 than 2020, because some of us had already shifted to how 2021 could look different, and then it started to feel more of the same as 2020. So I think what I saw that was most promising about 2021 was the momentum and conversation and some of the reports being generated about sanitation workers and their contribution to FSM and citywide inclusive sanitation. So I think 2021 is where we really saw a lot of the sanitation sector start to really promote and advocate for the sanitation workers' health and safety, and most importantly, their dignity. And we saw that with some advocacy campaigns in India. We saw that with one of the reports that came out from the WHO, the World Bank, the International Labour Organization, and WaterAid. And then also even the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development in Germany also released something on sanitation workers. So I feel really excited about the support that's growing for them. And I think that's where we can be hopeful for 2022.
Yeah, definitely. I know in our discussions, you talk a lot about sanitation workers being the direct implementers of CY, citywide inclusive sanitation. Tell me more about your thoughts on this.
Sure. No, this is something that I have been thinking about over the last year, and really thinking about the sanitation workers, the desludgers, the emptiers. Those are the ones that are actually providing daily or regular service to the most marginalized communities. So if we think about all of the principles that went into citywide inclusive sanitation, the emptiers are the ones that are actually serving those communities and doing direct service implementation. So I think if we're really wanting to strengthen citywide inclusive sanitation and see how it can help us reach SDG 6.2, I think that we really need to start looking at how we can better support the sanitation workers more practically, and what do they really need, and what would be the most helpful to them. And I say this with a very personal. I always think about my dad when I talk about the practicality of helping the emptiers. And I say this because most of you who are listening may not know, my dad actually was in the sanitation field in Seattle. So he actually ran the sanitation maintenance crew for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
In just outside of Seattle at a municipality. So he was there long enough. He has a lift station named after him.
Wow.
As his 30-year anniversary. And he would be able to drive you through any of the neighborhoods in his district and tell you about property disputes, where the water lines go, when that house flooded. So his encyclopedic knowledge of what happened, everything that's happened in that 30-year history that affected the water or the sewer lines, he could tell you.
Wow.
And so I do, and often when the power would go out, he would have to work. He would have to run the generator to all of the lift stations to keep the sewer system going. So these are some of my earliest memories of him going out to work to keep the sewer system functioning during power outages. And we lived, even though we were outside of Seattle, we lived in kind of an unincorporated municipality. So he had to go to keep the sewer system running. Yeah. So I think about him a lot in terms of practicality, because we know that the U.S. has, some personal protective equipment laws, and there's working conditions and labor conditions, and the U.S. has all of that, right? But I can tell you, in all of those times that my dad went out to work, he never wore any personal protective equipment. It's not because it wasn't available to him. It was an active choice. He thought it got in the way of his work. He didn't like wearing it. It was uncomfortable. And inevitably, I think he would still tell you he still wouldn't choose to wear it, even today. He never wore gloves. He used to smoke cigarettes too, so he wasn't washing his hands, and he wasn't wearing gloves before he smoked a cigarette on the job. But he also I think he would still say today that he still wouldn't change his decision to not wear it. And actually what ended up in the last stages of his career was he wasn't wearing protective eyewear, and he got an eye injury. So his vision is actually compromised in one eye because he wasn't wearing personal protective equipment. So when I say how can we help them practically, I know we talk a lot about personal protective equipment. It's not that I'm against it,
right?
But when I say let's try to be really practical, I think of my dad not wearing personal protective equipment every time especially when I see how cumbersome and uncomfortable some of it is. And this isn't a knock on PPE. It's just more an anecdotal story to advocate for practicality.
Yeah.
Because I've talked to other sanitation workers who don't want to wear it either. And so this is where I really feel like there are certain practicalities we aren't ever going to learn in a report. So I think it's really more about working with the emptiers directly and really giving them a voice to express their concerns, their needs specifically. And this is also, I think, an area that we could all be investing more resources, particularly money, to help support the sanitation workers. Because again, if you really think about, they are the ones directly implementing citywide inclusive sanitation. Investing in them is our best bet to get to better sanitation coverage. They're already doing the work that some utilities are not. So I think this is the best way to increase coverage for some of those communities, is really investing in the emptiers who have already decided to work and provide services to those folks. So this is where I think we really need to, as an international development sector and as a sanitation community, really come together and really think about what is helpful to them. And I have a feeling, based on some of the ones I've spoken to already, I think we really need to be looking at some microfinance to help them better invest in their business so they can increase their service radius and increase the number of households served.
Yeah. I remember during the World Emptying Challenge, you remember all that amazing amount of videos that we received with sanitation workers with their own businesses, basically showcasing their days in and out. And there was a particular group, I think it was from South Africa, where they were talking about we don't wear PPE because it's at risk of being stolen and then being sold. So it's these kind of things that really welcome us into the lives, into the worlds of sanitation workers, and helps us understand what they really need. So what you're saying is 100% on point. And yeah, I think that World Emptying Challenge, accompanied by there's been other activities, I think by Kaust as well. They had that pit emptying series.
They did, yeah.
Which I think was incredible as well. I know we have some things lined up in the future that you'll talk about later in the podcast. But yeah, I think FSM 6 for me, there's just everything about the conference, the planning, the theme, the support from the production team that we had. I think FSM 6 has to be one of my main highlights from 2021. I could go on forever about it, but highlights for you 2021, go.
I'd also have to say FSM 6. I'm not going to say COVID, surprisingly. Not year 2 of the pandemic. No, I think also FSM 6 as well. I think an area I'm also really proud of the work that we did for the World Emptying Challenge. I think it let us capture more teams than maybe would have been able to travel to Indonesia. So I think especially the Africa representatives. So I think that was really important. I think the other area, I'm really proud of the work that our conference committee did as well, because if for those of you who haven't seen the report, we did manage to get almost a 50-50 split on male and female speakers through the abstract process. So I think, and also in the plenary speakers as well. So we didn't have we let the session organizers drive a little bit more on some of the other sessions, so we didn't keep metrics there. But for the sessions that we really focused on, I think that's an area that I feel particularly proud of, because we did have both gender and geographical diversity. So I think it was close to 75% of the abstract presenters were from low to middle income countries. So in our goal to really try to change or to provide a platform for practitioners and service providers, I think we're trending in the right direction. It's something I think we definitely need to keep at for FSM 7 as well.
Yeah. No, that was great. That was awesome. So we also took some time to speak to the rest of the FSMA team about their 2021 highlights. So we speak to Eva Mary, who is the program coordinator for programs and administration, and we speak to Jan Heineke, who is the program coordinator for membership and events. So Eva, tell me about your highlights for 2021.
FSM6 was definitely one of the highlights, but also it was the attempting challenge in which we worked closely with all the teams. So seeing and connecting with those people, and also connecting with our partners in Indonesia virtually for the conference. Those were a big highlight, especially working in the current 2021 scenario of working remotely. Even after the conference, where we've been having our spotlight series, the webinars, and attending other webinars, just that I really enjoyed the fact that we, as in the sanitation sector, continue to keep in touch with each other and are genuinely able to connect online virtually. So that was, for me, that the coming together of the sector, the year two of, as Jennifer said, year two of the COVID pandemic. So
yeah, I definitely feel the same way. I think it just shows that no matter what situation we're in, if you have that perseverance, if you have that community spirit, we can still achieve what we want to achieve within the sector. So yeah, I agree with you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, pleasure.
So Jan, please tell me about your 2021 highlights.
Thanks, Michaela. Great. Looking back at 2021, it was really exciting for me to see our FSMA membership base grow. We had launched membership towards the end of 2020, so this year was actually the first full year of membership. And we were happy to onboard many individuals as well as organizations as new members throughout the year, and to also welcome many of them as delegates to the FSM6 conference. Saying that, I'd like to thank all our existing members, and we're just really, really privileged to have you on board. And we're very much looking forward to the next year, where we have some exciting new member initiatives planned. So stay tuned for some announcements on these soon. In terms of events, in addition to FSM6, we have conducted a variety of online sessions and workshops this year. These included capacity building sessions for our members, as well as the first two editions of a new public FSMA Spotlights webinar series. These sessions had a great turnout, lots of people attending, and I'd like to thank everyone who tuned in for those. We already have exciting spotlight topics lined up for Q1 next year, which we'll start promoting very soon. So I hope to see many of you there and wish you all a fantastic start into 2022.
Awesome. Thank you. Yes. Special shout out to our FSMA members. And yeah, I'm looking forward to joining some of those spotlight sessions. So yeah, thank you, Jan.
So Michaela, we've spent a little bit of time already talking about 2021. So I'm actually curious what you're most excited about or looking forward to in 2022.
Well, I would say definitely continuing with this podcast. I was excited in the month leading up to it, just because it's another fun way of advocating for FSM and the things that we're passionate about. I think the first podcast went really well, and I know that this podcast is also cool. But I know we spoke about talking about broader topics within FSM and sanitation. So I'm interested in talking to more people, meeting more people, albeit virtually, and sort of delving into topics that we should be talking about more. And also maybe, like we were just talking about sanitation workers, I think it'd be cool to have maybe one or two join us for an episode, just to get their insights as well. So so even the thought of that, there's so many ideas, and even in like our team meetings, there's like Jan would say, oh, there's this suggestion, Eva would say this, Gerard would also suggest some things. So it's just the possibilities of what we can achieve through this as an advocacy tool is something I'm really, really excited about. And who knows, it could be something, it could expand and evolve into something bigger than what we expected. So yeah, I'm also really curious and excited for FSM 7 planning.
Yes.
I know that it's happening in 2023, save the date. But yeah, just curious as to those discussions and theme and concepts and all of those things.
Yes, we will start the planning for FSM 7 in 2022. Again, looking forward to having as much time as possible to really plan a well thought out conference. I think I'm also curious, Michaela, to see what format we're in, given that the world has not changed in terms of COVID as much as we had liked. But I think, we're still starting. We've just sent a survey out to some of our members to try to crowdsource some ideas for themes and topics. So we are still collecting ideas on themes and topics. So.
Yeah, awesome. So listeners, if you have any suggestions, please drop them in the comments below.
Yes, we will look at them, I promise. Yeah, or send them to us.
Yeah.
So I think, we're still trying to decide what is the right theme for FSM 7. And I think something that has come up a little bit recently is the formalization of the FSM sector. And so that has become something that we're hearing that it's quite important to a lot of our members and some of our colleagues as well. So I think that's an area that I'm particularly excited about because, as we mentioned in the FSM 6 closing plenary, the FSM Alliance is going to be working on developing a global FSM industry standard to try to help formalize the FSM industry. So we're going to start off a little bit slow, but hopefully ramp up later in the year. So please check out our newsletter. We will be asking folks who are interested in hearing more about that to sign up and stay in touch with us because it will be a very, very stakeholder intensive process. So we are looking for as many people to join as possible in that development. We'll kind of divide it into regional subcommittees, I think. I think the most important facts being that it will be a global industry standard. And if you're unsure what that means, stay tuned because we will be doing a little education on that as well, maybe on this podcast or some of our other activities as well. I think the industry standard will really help us better define all the stages of FSM and the sanitation value chain and give really specific quantifiable requirements on what it takes to actually implement FSM and also create a cohesive shared common language. So when we talk about the formalization of the sector, these are some of the things that we mean. Quantifiable requirements to set it up and a shared common language. I think we're all sort of operating from our own versions of language and definitions, and while they overlap and most of the time we understand that we're talking about the same things, the only way to collect uniform data is to coalesce on shared definitions. So I never thought that I would be someone excited about standards. Just a shout out to Sun Kim for helping instill that excitement in me. But yes, it is something that I'm really looking forward to in 2022.
Amazing. Me too. I'm curious to see what happens. Are there any other things in 2022 that you're looking forward to?
Well, Michaela, I'm also excited about some of the podcasts specifically, which you mentioned, and then also some of our other activities as well. I think when we were preparing for some of our year-end workshops, one of the things that I really felt was missing from the FSM sector is there's a lot of places to publish your work from a technical perspective. Academic journals, if you're doing research or project reports, updates, things like that. But there's not really a dedicated platform to talk about where some of the technical issues intersect with the socioeconomic issues, the cultural factors, and how this is really a people problem and not a technology problem. If this were purely a technology problem, we would have been able to solve it years ago. There's plenty of smart engineers, coders, software developers, all the technical people, architects, builders, that all exists. But how we get some of the behavior change that needs to happen and where we talk about some of the systemic issues that are preventing us from meeting SDG 6.2. I think I'm really excited about this podcast being able to explore some of those issues.
Yeah.
But also we have another forum as well, which we're going to launch a quarterly FSM magazine, an e-magazine,
yes.
in 2022 as well, called FSMA Digest. And I think that will be another medium for people to share their opinion or project updates through a non-academic publishing route. So that's the other thing. We know that there are lots of academic ways that scientists and researchers can share their work. There's less of a platform for practitioners. And so this is really what we're aiming to do with FSMA Digest specifically, and FSMA Spotlights, which is our technical webinar series, and then also the podcast as well. So I think really just trying to diversify what issues we talk about that are related to FSM and sanitation and how we talk about them, that I'm particularly excited about.
Also, in our discussions, we've been talking about things scheduled for early next year. Jennifer, would you like to share some of those things?
Sure. Yeah, I'm pretty excited. So we'll kick off January pretty strong. So our first FSMA Spotlights technical webinar will be on a pit emptying technology guide that also includes kind of a worksheet or a planning tool to help you determine what pit emptying technology is best for you in certain conditions. And then we'll also be for the FSMA Presents podcast episode in January. One of the things that I've been talking a lot about as we navigate kind of post-COVID, or as close to post-COVID as we're going to get until we're actually there, TBD on when we get there. But I think in this new normal, what does philanthropy and international development look like in the new normal? And what mechanisms or things did organizations change for COVID, and what can we learn and what can we keep from COVID in terms of philanthropy, international development, and sanitation, particularly from a donor funding perspective. So we'll be having a podcast guest who's going to share some insights on that. She's got I'm going to say, for some of our listeners, maybe some radical suggestions from everything about how to make the strategy planning process easier, something she calls strategic friction, to how funders should be thinking about changing funding cycles and funding mechanisms to better suit real life conditions and what this new normal is. Because I think we can all safely say the way that we've experienced the world in the last 2 years is not the way that we thought. So I think this gives us a really good opportunity to make an opportunity from crisis and really think about what wasn't working for us and what can we change and what can we do moving forward. Because there's only, starting next year, there'll be 8 years until 2030. So the clock is on to meet the SDGs. Yeah.
Both very important and helpful topics. But Jennifer, you forgot one huge thing.
Did I? What did I forget?
All FSM 6 sessions will be publicly available on fsm6.org and on our YouTube channel. So everybody get ready for that. That's going to be publicly available in January, early January. So yeah, here's some good news for you guys.
Yes, and if you weren't able to attend the conference and you haven't seen some of the videos yet, we had an entire track on inclusivity and gender equity. We also had a really great session on co-treatment of fecal sludge and septage, led by one of our consultants in Malaysia. So there's some really great sessions there. Yeah. You're right. How did I forget that?
Yeah, but I think that's a wrap.
I feel ready to wrap 2021. I don't know about you, Michaela.
1000%. But would like to take this opportunity to say season's greetings, happy holidays for those celebrating Christmas.
Kwanzaa, all of the other December holidays that I'm totally drawing a blank on right now. Sorry. I'm sure there are more. And if you're not celebrating a holiday in December, I think we should all just take some time to celebrate the fact that we survived 2021 and COVID. We're all, for those of us that are still here, and remembering, of course, all of those that we've lost, not just to COVID, but just during this time.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you have a happy evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are. And see you next time.
Yes, see you in 2022. Thank you.